Recorded at an undisclosed location known only as the Homestead, you've tuned into Ever Vigilant. Our mission? To encourage and challenge men to prepare, defend, and lead at home and in their communities.
I'm going to start this podcast out by reading an article on History.com by Christopher Klein entitled London's World War I, Zeppelin Terror. As London settled into sleep on May 31st, 1915, a monstrous airborne machine blotted out the stars of the British night. Using the glow of the Thames as a guide, the biggest flying vessel ever constructed droned over the city. As a trap door opened from underneath the futuristic 650-foot-long craft, German troops sent 90 incendiary bombs and 30 grenades plummeting into the dark from the dark menace. London rattled, explosions illuminated the night, and panic tore through the city. The attack seemed to be ripped straight out of a science fiction novel. 8 years before, in fact, H.G. Wells had written The War in the Air, a novel in which Germany dispatched a huge herd of airships, some as mammoth as 2,000 feet long, in a surprise bombing raid against New York City. For Londoners, however, the storyline was all too real as dawn arrived with 7 dead and 35 wounded. The carnage that had infested the Western Front hundreds of miles away from the English Canal had now arrived at the British capital. For the first time in history, London was under attack from the air. The craft delivering the bombs was a terrifying new weapon of mass destruction, the Zeppelin. The colossal hydrogen-filled ocean liners of the air, named for the German army officer Count Ferdinand Graf von Zeppelin, who developed them in 1900, 3 years before the Wright brothers took flight, that for years had carried civilians on pleasure cruises, were now being deployed to kill them. In the early months of World War I, German military employed their airships, which were capable of traveling 85 miles per hour and hauling 2 tons of explosives on bombing raids on the cities of Liège, Antwerp, and Paris. On January 19, 1915, the Zeppelin struck Great Britain for the first time, dropping bombs on the seaside towns of Great Yarmouth and King's Lynn. With targeting of civilian populations from the air, modern warfare had arrived. Nowadays, there's no such animal as a non-combatant, justified German Zeppelin Corps commander Peter Strasser. Modern warfare is total warfare. Germany hoped that bombing of Britain would spark such fear that it would force the country out of the war. The military ramped up Zeppelin production to the point that Germany ceased production of sausage because the intestinal linings of cows were used as sausage skins were required to fashion the skins of the Zeppelin's leak-proof hydrogen chambers. 250,000 cows were needed to build one Zeppelin. After the initial strike of London on May 1915, Zeppelins continued to hit the city with impunity, timing raids to coincide with the good weather, moonless nights. Not wanting to foment panic, British civil authorities gave few air raid warnings, beyond policemen on bicycles blowing whistles and shouting for people to take cover. Technology also limited what Britain could do to stop the Zeppelins early in the war because its planes were unable to soar as high as the lighter-than-air craft, and machine gun fire had no effect. Londoners huddled in basements and descended deep underground in the city's tube stations to escape the terror from the skies. On September 8, 1915, the shadow of a sleek, cigar-shaped Zeppelin passed over the dome of St. Paul's Cathedral and unloaded a 3-ton bomb, the largest ever dropped at the time, on the city's financial hub. The attack caused massive damage and killed 22 civilians, including 6 children. The Zeppelin raid would be the worst of the war on London. The public now demanded more protection from the airships they referred to as baby killers. Britain instituted blackouts and installed massive searchlights. Anti-aircraft defenses were diverted from the front lines in France and positioned around the capital. Authorities drained the lake at St. James Park to prevent its nighttime glitter from directing Zeppelins to nearby Buckingham Palace. And to build morale, Charlie Chaplin filmed a propaganda short in which he brought down a Zeppelin. My name's Joe Prim. I started this podcast about 4 years ago in an effort to, as the intro states, challenge and encourage men to prepare, defend, and lead. That is still the focus of this podcast because I see far too many men ambling about, shoulders shrugged, heads down, not exactly sure what their role in our modern society is. So if you tuned into this podcast for the first time, or even if you've been listening for a long time and you expect me to kind of go with the flow, go with what everybody else is saying and say in a couple weeks, this coronavirus thing will be over and our lives will return to normal, this is the wrong podcast for you. I don't think that things will ever be quite the same. The way I'm looking at things right now is there is a massive paradigm shift. There is a new normal. What we have known in the past, what was 2-3 weeks ago, no longer is. We all go through or have gone through paradigm shifts in our life, whether it's the loss of a job, whether it be someone that we love or care about is diagnosed with an awful disease, whether we're in a car accident where one moment we're upset that traffic is causing us to be late for an appointment, the next moment we wake up in the ER, or whether somebody we're really close to dies. When these things happen, there's a paradigm shift in your life. There's a complete change because from that instant, from that moment, from that day forward, something will no longer be the same. And until you come to a point in your life where you will accept that change, you cannot move on, you cannot move forward, you cannot plan out and prepare for your future. If you lost your job, you need to come to that acceptance so that you can start to work on the resume, so that you can start to reach out to your network, so that you can start to build connections again. If it's somebody that passed away, you need to come to that point of acceptance so that you can move on with your life, so you're not being held back, so that depression or anguish don't keep you from the tasks that you have to accomplish day to day. If it's a sickness or a disease or an accident, you need to come to that point of acceptance so that you can move on to get a second opinion, so that you can move on to get the testing done, so that you can move on to start to schedule surgeries or whatever else may be involved in coming back from that life-altering moment. I don't think that it is wise for us to look at what's going on at this moment with the coronavirus. Millions of people locked down in their homes, millions of people being told what they can and can't buy, the economy going into the tank. I do not think that it's wise for us to just think that next week or the week after that everything will somehow go back to normal. I think it's a very dangerous way of thinking. I think it's a very dangerous way of looking at things. And if somehow things do just go back to normal, all the better. But this show is about prepare, defend, and lead. And I will always take a realistic approach to things. And I don't believe that you can begin to prepare for tomorrow until we accept where we are at today and the potential issues that tomorrow may bring. I want to read a quick article that I found on Drudge a couple days ago. It's called The Best Case Outcome for Coronavirus and the Worst. Of course, this is just somebody's opinion, somebody that interviewed and talked to several different doctors and financial experts, and all of this stuff ranges from what one person is saying all the way to a completely different idea of what somebody else is saying. And I think that is part of the problem here. There is no consensus. And when there is no consensus, there is a problem. The grimmest version of a life from now, a year from now, So this is the worst case scenario according to this article. More than 2 million Americans have died from the new coronavirus, almost all mourned without funerals. Countless others have died because hospitals were too overwhelmed to deal adequately with heart attacks, asthma, and diabetic crisis. The economy has cratered into a depression, for fiscal and monetary policy are ineffective when people fear going out, businesses are closed, and tens of millions of people are unemployed. A vaccine still seems far off. Immunity among those who have recovered proves fleeting, and the coronavirus has joined the seasonal flu as a recurring peril. And here would be an alternative scenario, best case scenario according to this article for March 2021. Life largely returned to normal by late summer of 2020. The economy has rebounded strongly. The United States has a sharp, short shock in the spring of 2020 to break the cycle of transmission. Warm weather has reduced new infections and provided a summer respite for the Northern Hemisphere. By the second wave in the fall, mutations had attenuated the coronavirus. Many people were immune, and drugs were shown effective in treating it and even reducing infection. Thousands of Americans died, but by February 2021, vaccinations were introduced worldwide and the virus was conquered. Now, the article goes into much deeper detail with quotes from doctors about why and how they came to these conclusions. But either way, we are in the midst of a paradigm shift. The sooner we understand that, the sooner we grasp that, the sooner that we can change our mindset and begin to prepare, defend, and lead on into a different future. We know how to prepare, defend, and lead in the past. And if things go back to that, we're fully ready. What we don't understand and we don't fully know is how we're going to prepare, defend, and lead going on into a different future. And the sooner we can begin to think that through, the sooner that we can begin to plan what that looks like, the less likely we are to make mistakes, the less likely we are to put ourselves in a worse situation than we potentially already are in. I believe that it is imperative that we stop believing that in a couple of weeks things will be back to normal. Normal has been redefined, and the new normal is not the old normal. We must accept this in order to mentally think clearly and prepare for what is to come. Otherwise, you leave yourself in denial and put yourself and your family in danger. Now is the time to start communicating with those that maybe are family or friends that live in a rural community. Now is the time to start maybe putting aside some water. Now is the time, if you haven't already, to start putting away and stocking up on some food. Now is the time, if you haven't already, to find a means to defend yourself and your family. Now is the time. Begin to prepare the game plan for you and your family of what you do should violence begin to break out in your neighborhood. We know that people will always go back to self-preservation. All animals, whether they're big or small, and humans are no exception, will always seek to preserve their life and the way they want to live. That means if you have something that they want and people are put in a position where they can no longer get it, you may become a target. And if you are not fully prepared and you have not planned what you and your family will do in that, should that occur, you will be behind. You will be, as I've talked about in podcasts before, on the wrong side of bang. We do not know where that bang moment is. We are hopefully still on the left of bang. If we look at a timeline and we put bang right in the middle of that timeline, I would like to hope that we are still to the left of that bang. That means as time is ticking closer and closer to bang, we have less and less time to plan and prepare for what we are going to do should that bang happen. Should things turn for the worse? Should things get really, really ugly? Right now, we have time. We have the clarity of mind. We have full bellies. We have clean clothes. Now we have time to think through what the plan will be, what our action will be should that bang happen and we find ourselves on the right side of that bang. Maybe the bang in this instance does not happen. But while we're on the left side of it, let's plan, let's prepare ourselves to defend and to lead during this time. Part of this, as a father, is to begin to prepare your wife and your children for what may be to come. I have begun to do that. We've had pizza this past week. We talked about that and enjoyed that pizza as if it was our last pizza. We have done that with each thing that is something that we've enjoyed and something that we have liked. We've eaten it, we've joked about, and we've talked about that possibly being the last banana, or that being the last pizza, or this being the last this or that. Because the reality is we don't know. And if I'm telling my kids and not preparing them for what could possibly be a future shift, I put them in a much worse situation. So begin to talk to them about reality. Begin to talk to them about preparing. Begin to talk to them about the dangers, the good, the bad, why we don't have fear, but why we're going to prepare. I've talked to my kids for years about how we plan for the worst and expect the best. This stuff, this talk for them is not new, but maybe it is for your kids. Maybe it will be for your wife. You need to step up, prepare, defend, and lead. The better that you can prepare, the better spot that you can put yourself in, the better place you'll be to move on and succeed by fully accepting this new paradigm. You will adapt better and can put your family in a place to succeed versus exist. The new defenses were in place on September 2nd, 1916, when Germans launched their largest raid of the war with a fleet of 16 airships heading to London. The searchlights scouring the skies caught one of the silver Zeppelins sparkling in their beams. The Royal Flying Corps pilot William Leif Robinson soared over 11,000 feet and closed in on his prey. He raked the Zeppelin with bullets that punctured the Leviathan like harpoons. Suddenly, the mighty warship ignited like a torch, and the fireball fell from the sky like a shooting star that could be seen for hundreds of miles around. Londoners cheered and sang patriotic tunes as the incinerated Zeppelin plummeted to the earth. The tide had been turned. Other British pilots achieved similar success in shooting down airships. Strasser ordered his fleet to fly at higher altitudes, but the crews began to suffer from the frigid temperatures and became incapacitated from oxygen deprivation. The Zeppelin raids on London continued, but far less frequently, and by 1917, Germany began to deploy heavy biplane bombers in their stead. Over the course of the war, German Zeppelins staged more than 50 attacks on Britain, but with a heavy price, with 77 of their 115 craft either shot down or disabled. The German Zeppelin raids on London killed nearly 700 and seriously injured about 2,000, but the casualties did not include the ultimate German aim of breaking British morale. The waging of total war against the civilian populations, however, did not fade with the Zeppelin era. 2 decades later, terror again fell from the London skies when the next World War arrived, and this time with much deadlier consequences, as nearly 20,000 of the city's residents died in the London Blitz. The London authorities at that time did not sit back and just take what was coming. And I want you to do the same for yourself and for your family. Take initiative. Sit back. Spend some time thinking. Spend some time praying through a plan to get yourself out of Dodge should you need to. But also get yourself mentally prepared for a new world, a new time, so that should things completely change on us, should everything that we have known and counted on, should our life of ease and comfort, should our life living in Candyland of guardrails and bicycle helmets come to an end, that you will be prepared, that you will at the very least be mentally ready to step into the unknown fearlessly to lead those who are important to you. Thanks for listening to this podcast. If you have any questions whatsoever about preparing, about getting yourself mentally prepared, about firearms, about food storage, about anything that you heard in this podcast that you are just not quite sure about, things that maybe you just really never thought about in the way that I'm presenting it today, reach out to me. You can reach out to me at evervigilantpodcast@gmail.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at @theevervigilant and send me a DM there. If I can't answer your questions, I have some great people that I will refer you to. You can go to vigilantwolf.com. On that website, I have articles written by some great men to help get you thinking in a solid way of what it means to be a man living and leading for Christ. I have gear, medical gear from Archangel Dynamics, and belts and that sort of gear from Brown Coat Tactical. One of the big sellers right now on there is shotgun shell holders that are affixed through Velcro onto your shotgun. If that's something you're interested in, go check them out on the website. I pulled down my holsters off of the website right now. If you are in real need of something, I might have it in my overstock. I'm sitting on some stuff. If that's something that you need, hit me up. I will do what I can to get you taken care of. Also on the website, you can listen to the full archives of this podcast. If you would like to support this podcast, if you are in a spot to support this podcast, you haven't lost your job yet, and you want to keep me going, go to patreon.com/evervigilant, and you can join the Wolf Pack there. I'm still working presently. If that changes, I will do my best to put out an episode each day of the week. Something short, something sweet, but something to keep you guys informed and keep us moving in the right direction. You were created for a time such as this. You are where you are for a reason, for a purpose. Step up, chin up, shoulders back. The time is now to prepare, defend, and lead. Hold fast, men. God bless.
For the strength of the pack is the wolf, and the strength of the wolf is the pack.